All right, welcome back to Global Spiritual Revolution Radio and Media Group here in New York City, New York. And you can watch us live. This is the TV portion of Global Spiritual Revolution Radio and Media Group here in New York City, New York by going to facebook.com/day3TV. Again, beloved, that is facebook.com/day3TV. We are so excited to have back with us Mr. David Hawkins, global forensic economist with abledanger.org, abledanger.org. And David, it is such a great honor for us to have you back, sir, on Global Spiritual Revolution Radio.
Well, it's a great pleasure to be with you, Bishop.
All right, let's get into part 5 of the greatest conspiracy ever told. And the subtopic tonight will be Kelly, the brief 263 brief 263, circles Dumb Dumb Pig Farm Wagers, Con Air, the Twin Towers on 9/11, and also we're going to get into some of these Mendenhall oaths as well. The floor is yours because this is very interesting.
Well, thank you very much, Bishop, and it gets to be a horrendous story that we're gradually piecing together, and it stretches back into decades past. In fact, certainly before World War II, but in World War II, something very interestingly happened. The British were basically faced with the threat of a German invasion, and whilst they had some of the smarts, the specialized equipment, such as radar, they didn't have the production capability. So a man called Henry Tizard was sent by the Churchill government to Washington to see if they could put together a trade, and they put together a fascinating trade that actually involved the transfer of technology, in particular the cavity magnetron, to the Americans. They didn't have that would allow you to detect the periscope of a German submarine from a plane with great accuracy, and of course that changed the Battle of the Atlantic and the result. But I've just discovered, in fact, I discovered only yesterday, that whilst the British were offering the Americans the technology, there was a conspiracy going on between a company in New York and its British subsidiary to retain control over that technology through the patent office. And the American company was Radio Corporation of America, headed up by David Sarnoff. And the subsidiary in the United Kingdom was RCA-GB 1929, meaning it started in 1929. And this cavity magnetron effectively controlled the outcome of World War II, certainly the Battle of the Atlantic. And by retaining control through the patent office, in fact, private corporations were able to game the war between Germany and the Americans and the United Kingdom and obtain a very lucrative result in terms of contracts. And so it's very interesting to know that today we recognize RCA-GB 1929 as the British company Serco, which actually runs the American Patent Office. It also runs the United States Defense Ammunition Center, and I'm going to come to ethnic bullets in a minute. And it runs the American National Visa Center. So in 1994, the British started allowing Al-Qaeda sleeper cells into the United States and positioning them in New York and Washington, ready for the attacks of 9/11 that we attribute to Osama bin Laden. But we have to remember that Osama bin Laden was probably dead by then. He was on a dialysis machine in Dubai. And basically, he was out of the picture. After the 9/11 attack in Arabic, he's interviewed multiple times, and he says, I had nothing to do with the attack of 9/11. So he was a patsy set up by the British. But if I may, perhaps I could just address this fascinating issue of the ethnic bullet. Shall I talk to that?
Absolutely.
The British developed a hollow nose collapsing bullet in the late 19th century that became the subject of the Hague Convention of 1899, where about 20 countries banned it, but 2 countries carried on, I think South Africa and the United Kingdom. And the idea of this bullet, and it's just staggering the kind of cynicism there, the British agent or representative of the Hague Convention of 1899 said, we got a lot of problems in our colonies because we're often attacked by fanatical barbarians who our normal bullets won't stop, right? So these guys could take up to 6 bullets and get through to a British soldier and cut his head off, you see. So the British developed a special bullet that would actually collapse on impact, transferring all of its kinetic energy into the onrushing barbarian and bring them to a halt. Now, people might think, well, the Hague Convention banned it, but they didn't necessarily follow the patent office to see if derivatives of this hollow-nosed bullet could be developed and used by forces perhaps more evil than most of us would care to think. And there is now a modern bullet called a biological bullet that has been patented. And into the space of the hollow bullet can be placed things that I believe they're trying to tune to the ethnicity of the target. So if they decide that black people should be eliminated, or Jews should be eliminated, or climate deniers should be eliminated, they could put a package of chemicals and biological agents inside the bullet and single out selectively people that might need to be erased from the earth. Now, I believe you know considerably more about Margaret Sanger than I do, but would you say that she believed in ethnic cleansing? Over to you.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you brought up her name, David. Margaret Sanger, and to our listeners here today, we are talking with world-renowned historian, world-renowned thinker, Mr. David Hawkins here on Global Spiritual Revolution Radio. 1929, Margaret Sanger met a well-known African-American man by the name of Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois in Harlem, and she wanted to create the first abortion clinic in Harlem, New York, which took place the following year. And it's interesting about Margaret Sanger in her plan of eugenics that she used the black pastors in Harlem, New York, because 9 times out of 10, whatever the pastor of that church says, 9 times out of 10, the people will go along with it. So Margaret Sanger, in her diabolical mindset, used the African-American pastors in Harlem, beginning with Dr. Adam Clayton Powell Sr., who she gave $500 to in 1930 to gather all of the African-American pastors, a part of the Harlem Pastoral Alliance in 1930, and every pastor got $500 to allow Planned Parenthood to come in and to target the African-American community. So I'm so happy that you brought her up, because this woman is one of the most evil women in American history.
Well, she has a lot of apologists, and I noticed that there are people saying that she actually had good intent because she wanted to raise the nutrition and health value for everyone. But I think I agree with you, and what I'm appalled by is to discover, I think, convincing proof that they experimented at the pig farm up here in British Columbia over a period of 1996 to 2002 with bullets that had been loaded up with chemical or biological agent to see if they could actually accelerate the impact on certain ethnic groups. In this particular case, First Nations groups, the people, the North Indian tribes of North America that were here before the colonialists arrived.
Hey, not to cut you off, David, we're hearing some static from your end, so you can probably check your wiring. We're hearing some static. Go right ahead.
Okay. How's that?
It's a little better. You were just hearing some light static.
Yes, I think I'm getting a little bit, and it looks as though it's coming from your end, but anyway, it's out there. Is it good enough to continue?
It's good now, yes.
Okay.
Sounds better.
So now, a federally registered society that I wouldn't be surprised had its roots in the kind of prejudices of Margaret Sanger called Piggy Palace Good Time Society was set up in 1996 to hold events, sports and entertainment events, at this pig farm, which was run by a well-known family in Port Coquitlam called the Picton family, of which there were 3 siblings, 1 sister and 2 brothers. And Robert Picton is now in jail with a double consecutive life sentence for the second-degree murder of 6 women out at the pig farm. The other brother, who's a Hells Angels, was apparently a gun nut, and he had a workshop near this barn where upwards of 1,700 to 2,000 people would fly in for a Friday night rave. A significant number of those, I believe, Bishop, were transported on Field McConnell's sister's Conair, the United States Justice Prisoner and Alien Transportation System.
Yes, sir.
Now, what this woman, Christine Marcy, did, and again, if you're thinking of a word like diabolical, this woman is way off the spectrum. She launched a prisoner medical services program in the United States, which allowed her, or would allow her, to administer psychotropic drugs to prisoners, turning them into, you could imagine them as homicidal aliens, if you will. And she would have had, in the 90s, probably 1 million plus prisoners passing through the hands of Conair, being transported from jail to jail, Hawaii to the mainland, etc., etc. Now, I can think of nothing better if I wanted to mount an insurrection or a coup d'etat in the United States than to energize or radicalize the prison population, which would obviously have a very large number of blacks in it, because there are proportionately more blacks in prison than whites, according to the population. Now, whether that's the blacks committing more crime, it's almost incidental. But what's very interesting is in Chicago, as I understand it, many blacks are fleeing the downtown area of Chicago because it's just not safe for their kids. Now, one could argue that's the fault of the black population. It could also be argued that actually that has been contrived by people like the mayor of Chicago, who's a great friend of Obama. You know, what is it? His name is Rahm. And in many ways, I think this guy's a psychopath. But anyway, that's by the by. I digress. The problem with these bullets is you could look at the patent, and the full name of the patent is, well, the patentee or assignee is a man called Darren Rubin, and he's invented a biological active bullets, systems, and methods, which has been patented under US 9200877B1. I'll repeat that. US 9200877B1. And this bullet, it's the most amazing bullet because you can load it up with anything you like, including radioactive material, so you could track a wounded victim through aircraft screening, airline screening, before they get on a plane, because they leave a trail of radioactive material. You could also put in the hollow-nosed bullet paralytics, which, as its name implies, would paralyze the individual, a nerve agent which would cause them hideous suffering before they died, an anticoagulant so they would bleed to death. In fact, you could pick a salad of these chemical or biological agents to create any impact that you liked, other than just the simple injury of the bullet hitting the target, which goes back to 1899. So now, where as demonic as this would you experiment in the United States and avoid the attention of what's left of the FBI? Well, you'd do it in Canada. You'd actually do it at a pig farm in British Columbia, where you could abduct, and most of them were prostitutes, and most of them were First Nations prostitutes, from the poorest postal district in in Canada. So you would abduct an individual, a woman from there, and take her out for these Friday night raves and shoot her in front of an audience of 2,000 people and invite the audience to bet on the time it would take her to die. Now, I don't know if on the range of demonic evil that's way off the spectrum. My concern is that Christine Marcy, Field's sister, could actually arrange for the guests at the pig farm to fly up on Conair, to have, I don't know if you have the same term in the States, the MC, the master of ceremonies for these raves, to be picked out of a local jail, because the master of ceremonies who's organizing the betting and the murder of the woman has got to be either evil beyond belief or drugged up to his eyeballs, or her eyeballs. So on the stage, this is my hypothesis, in front of an audience of maybe 1,700 to 2,000 people, many from out of town, many from the United States, would watch a woman being shot and then dying from a variety of causes: paralysis, bleeding to death, nerve agent, screaming in pain, etc. And of course, what is done then is to film that process. So every member of the audience is compromised. Then you broadcast that movie on a pay-per-view system called Starnet Communications, that had an office in 425 Carroll Street in Vancouver, that was raided on the 20th of August of 1999 by 100 law enforcement agents, including 2 SWAT teams from the United States, one from Customs and one from IRS. And what they did is they took away all of the servers, all of the files, all of the videos, and they took it south of the border. So your listeners might be interested to ask, well, where did it go? I certainly am interested. I don't know where it went, but I thought there's a concept in espionage called hidden in plain view. One of the best places to hide stuff like this is where people don't notice it because it's part of their background thinking. So I invite you to consider, Bishop, and your listeners to consider a number of places where that technology might have been taken, which would have had all the evidence that would allow you to blackmail some very significant players in Canada and the United States prior to the 9/11 attack. So I've got a few places where I think it might have been taken. One is the war room in the Boeing headquarters in Chicago. After all, this company, Starnet Communications, was accused prior to the raid of distributing child pornography, extreme images of sadomasochistic sex, and online gaming. Now, for me, I would think, well, if you're accused of distributing extreme images of sadomasochistic sex, who's providing the content? And I've decided it would be the pig farm, right? Who's providing the child pornography? Well, what about the individual who would have access to the children whose mothers were killed at the pig farm? That is to say, children that are passed into the social Ministry of Children and Families in BC, where you've got corrupt bureaucrats who are actually, I believe, selling, and of course, it's, as is usual, not all corrupt. You only need a few people within the organization to cast a different slant on the entire organization. We know that from traitors or spies within the United States military. And then the betting, the online, the real-time betting. So let me give you the name of the patent, which is actually been invented by a man called Howard Lutnick. Now, does Howard Lutnick ring a bell to you, Bishop?
No, sir.
Howard Lutnick was the man who escaped the attack on 9/11. He was the chief executive officer of Cantor Fitzgerald in the North Tower. And he claims he was taking his child to school on the morning of 9/11. So he escaped the fate of 657 or 658 of his colleagues at Cantor Fitzgerald who died in the inferno in the North Tower, including his brother. Now, isn't that incredibly convenient? He's out of the tower, and he invents a system for interactive real-time wagering on event outcomes.
Wow.
So he, this is my allegation, provided the patent for Starnet Communications to place bets or take bets through high rollers in elite hotels, watching the women being killed at the pig farm on when they would die.
Mm-hmm.
So on 911, why wouldn't he have provided the same technology to Starnet Communications so they could place bets on the time that the victims at the top of the North Tower would die after the impact of the penetrator missile which hit the North Tower? It's exactly the same level of evil, the same attitude to human life, the same lack of empathy or compassion for the victims, because with these people, it's immaterial whether you're black or white or brown or yellow or Christian or Hindu or Muslim. What's interesting to them is to propagate terror amongst we the people such that we suspend our critical imagination, which is where Able Danger has come in, because just recently I'm discussing with my colleagues at Able Danger how to refocus all the work we've done over the last years, where essentially we've analyzed the how and the what.
Mm-hmm.
And when people ask me, why would they do that? I now say to them, well, who is they and what have they done?
Right.
Because if you're telling me Osama bin Laden did it, I can tell you that he didn't have the technology to execute the attack or the pilots who could fly through those maneuvers on 911, so he wasn't responsible for it.
Exactly.
If you say the Jews did it or the Israelis did it, right? Until you define the what, I can't answer the question why. And anyway, the why is really for the judge and the jury. And what I believe is, I think Thomas Jefferson said, an informed public will make the right decision. Mm-hmm. So what Able Danger, at least to the extent that I can influence them, is committing to is now a strategy called community CSI, or community crime scene investigation, that I'd invite you and your listeners to investigate and adopt, because I'm saying within every community that has been injured by these kind of events, there are people who know what happened and how the crime was committed. So in the downtown east side, for example, the poorest postal district in Canada, there is an active prostitution going on all the time. Mm-hmm. Many of those people are vulnerable, drug-taking First Nations people, but they're not stupid. The same areas, I'm sure, exist in New York, including in the areas around the Twin Towers that came down on 911. The firefighters who attended those fires, where 343 firefighters were ambushed when they demolished the Twin Towers around their ears. Many of them will be black. There's no doubt some Hindus, there's some Muslims, etc. But like I said, the color, the creed, the race, and the ideology of the victims is immaterial to these people.
Right. And David, we talked about this last time when you were on the TV portion of the broadcast back in January. This Christopher Hyman of Circle. Before we get into the piranha aspect of what we're going to be talking about here today, because you got me so excited again. We have with us the Honorable Mr. David Hawkins here on Global Spiritual Revolution Radio, a media group here in New York City, New York, on the TV portion. Please continue to send in your questions via email, Global Spiritual Revolution Radio at yahoo.com. Again, beloved, Global Spiritual Revolution Radio at yahoo.com. And you can also, in real time, ask our guest any questions concerning today's topic. This Christopher Hyman, give us some background on him before we get into the piranha and the Mendenhall oaths here. Who is Christopher Hyman? He had this meeting on the 47th floor. Go right ahead.
Okay. Christopher Hyman was the chief executive officer of Serco. He attended a breakfast meeting at the Windows of the World restaurant on the morning of 9/11. I guess he showed up around, I would say, 7:30 or 8 o'clock, and the breakfast meeting was organized by the Risk Waters Group, which was a British risk and insurance agency that had invited a number of high flyers from the Wall Street financial community to this breakfast meeting, and Christopher Hyman was there. At some stage, I would say between 8 o'clock and 8:30, he decided that he would go down and make a presentation to Serco shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets in the elevator. Now, who he went with, I don't know, whether he went alone or with a little entourage, I don't know. But everyone who he left behind died in the attack of 911.
Wow.
Now, they didn't die on the impact of the plane, because the plane hit, I think, somewhere around the 88th floor of the building.
Mm-hmm.
So 20 floors above, these people would be having their breakfast meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So, however, they were doomed to die because the explosives placed in the stairwells would prevent them from escaping. This was a very sophisticated act of sabotage, right, with explosives preloaded into the building at different places, so there would be no escape. So Hyman comes down and he makes a presentation to the shareholders of Serco on the 47th floor. So it's very important, I think, for Americans to understand who are the Serco shareholders who would have sent representatives to that meeting, all of whom survived, incidentally, right? And the question is, of course, what were they meeting about? I think they were placing bets on when the people in the windows of the world were going to die. Again,
That's
cynicism to a level quite extraordinary. Not one of those people at that meeting has been hauled before the FBI and said, what were you doing on the 47th floor?
Yes.
Right? Which means the FBI is deeply corrupted or compromised or fearful, including, and in particular, Robert Mueller, the then FBI director, who's now swanning around trying to nail Trump for collusion and having or hiring, as I understand it, a couple of prostitutes to urinate on the bed previously occupied by President Obama and his wife.
Yes.
The year before. I mean, you've got to have a British sense of humor. I can see by your smiling, you can see the stupidity of this. All right.
No.
But anyway, that's by the by. So he goes down to the 47th floor, and he presents something to the shareholders of Serco. Let me give you the identities of some of Serco's shareholders that are relevant to the 911 attack.
Yes. Well,
10 of them are so-called global custodians, such as BNY Mellon, Bank of New York Mellon, with over $20 trillion of assets under administration.
Wow.
Another one is Northern Trust of Chicago, which was the alien property custodian in World War I and World War II, and that's the custodian of the BC Pension Fund, right, up here in British Columbia, which financed a loan to develop the pig farm dance hall. Everything is connected. Right? Then there are three governments, which is the United Kingdom or British government, the Saudi Arabian government, and the Singaporean government. But I thought Saudi Arabia was a suspect.
Right.
For sending the muscle hijackers from Qasim province to pick up their visas in Dubai, provided by Serco through the United States National Visa Center. So you've got three countries, sovereign states, that are actually meeting on the 47th floor. So my question to the United Kingdom is, well, who did you send?
Yes.
To represent your interests in Serco? And Saudi Arabia, who did you send? Right? And where it gets really exciting is Serco's investment banker on 911, well, and preceding, right through from the management buyout from RCAGB in 1929 through to the IPO, the initial public offering of Serco in 1989, shortly after a conversation between Phil McConnell and Christine Marcy, but I digress. So you've got the three countries, the British government, the Saudi Arabian government, and the Singaporean government. Then you have two pension funds that would probably claim to represent the interests of a so-called intellectual elite, right? Now, with all due respect, they probably don't consider you a member of the intellectual elite or me. I think both intelligent. I think they're dumb as a bag of hammers because what they lack is emotional intelligence. That is to say, the ability to put themselves in the minds of the victims and understand that one day the victim is going to wake up and it's going to put them on death row. But that's by the by. All right? So you have the two intellectually elite pension funds, which is the Teachers Insurance Annuity Association in the United States and the University Superannuation Scheme in the United Kingdom. Now, let me go back to World War II
Yes.
with the patent that changed the battle in the Atlantic, where the device was invented in Birmingham University. And an example of it was brought by Henry Tizard in the Tizard mission to Washington for examination by the American military intelligence and defense establishment. And when they saw this device, which allowed you a 3-centimeter wavelength, very high frequency, to pick up German periscopes when the submarines poked their head above the water, and to take out the submarines. So the extraordinary thing is that device, the cavity magnetron, was patented around that time by RCA, Radio Corporation of America. So actually they were hedging their bets. Nominally, they tricked the Americans into, here's your technology, right? Now you start producing it. So at the beginning of the war, the British had, I think, made about 10 of these devices, one of which was brought over by the Tizard mission.
Yes.
By the end of the war, the American production had reached 1 million a year.
Wow.
That changed the Battle of the Atlantic. That's how we collectively, and I still argue that the British and the Americans and the Canadians and the Australians and New Zealanders have a unique friendship that's deeply abiding. But they've all been infiltrated by this group that doesn't care whether you're black or white or brown or yellow or Hindu or Muslim or Christian.
Right.
They want to do is terrify you into submission. So you suspend your critical faculties. Well, they haven't suspended mine, and I suspect they haven't suspended yours.
That's right. Again, I want to get into Christine Marcy as well, but this Piranha Project, don't mean to go all over the map, David. We have with us Mr. David Hawkins of abledanger.org, abledanger.org. Continue to send in your questions to Global Spiritual Revolution Radio at yahoo.com. Again, beloved, Global Spiritual Revolution Radio at yahoo.com. You can also send us your questions in real time. Now, I've been getting a lot of emails the past few days in preparing for you, David. There's some confusion about Christine Marcy being the director or the head of this senior executive services that was enacted into law through Congress in 1978. Now, I got an email today, and if I'm wrong, you can correct me on this. I got an email today from a colleague in the ministry whose daughter goes to the University of Syracuse. And it stated that this man by the name of Alan K. Scotty Campbell was chosen by President Jimmy Carter in 1978 through the Civil Service Reform Act to lead, to be the director of this senior executive service. And then again, I'm hearing a lot of people say that Christine Marcy was the director of this. But according to the University of Syracuse, all right, it says that Alan K. Campbell left Maxwell, which is a department there at Syracuse University here in northern New York, to become the dean of the Lyndon Baines Johnson School of Public Affairs. But it says in 1978, he was chosen by President Jimmy Carter to lead this senior executive service. Can you give us some clarification on that?
Yes, so he would have been the nominal organization man who put together presumably the association and the agreement relating to the senior executive service. And then he worked with 7 charter members. And Christine Marcy is one of those charter members. Right?
Okay.
So we don't need to get too hung up on titles. What's interesting is that Christine Marcy then played a key position in the, how shall I put it, the corruption of the senior executive service. to create this incredible bureaucracy that has its fingers into every government department. And she worked in 10 of those government departments. I believe she was actually infiltrating those government departments with senior executive service personnel who would be loyal through, dare I say it, the kinds of oaths like the Mendenhall oath,
Yes.
to do exactly what they were told to do because they were being blackmailed. So I would argue, yet to be proven, but she has all the abilities to make it happen. Many of these senior executive service people were walked into a pedophile or a Mendenhall trap, basically an initiation ceremony, where they were filmed by British intelligence, right, and then subsequently extorted and blackmailed when they reached high enough positions on 911. So, for example, the U.S. Navy Command Center, the people who would have been controlling the response to the threat of 911 would have been senior executive service personnel. And very obviously, they were told to stand down. Now, they can only be told to stand down by the people who they know have the images that are so compromising, they would rather die or betray their country than have those images revealed.
Wow.
One of the first victims, I believe, of a Mendenhall baby rape or sodomy was Christine Marcy. And I don't know if you've seen the pictures, but Nicholas Soames, the grandson of Winston Churchill, was out in Washington at the time. He would go on to become the personal aide to Senator Mark Hatfield, the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee. But I think he sodomized Christine Marcy. Well, sodomized, I don't think anatomically that gives rise to a conception. But anyway, that would have been in November of 1978 because the baby described in the Washington Post article of 1979, late August, the Mendenhall baby would then be Jessica Marcy, which is Field McConnell's niece. And if I look at Jessica Marcy, who was described not by me, not by you, but in the Washington Post article of August of 1979, she's not described as McConnell's baby, which would be true if Christy Marcy was using her maiden name, or Marcy's baby if she was using her husband's name. She's described as Mendenhall's baby. And Mendenhall, you know, I mean, I'm not being, I think, speaking out of turn. I've never heard of the phrase Mendenhall. And probably you've looked it up independently. But Mendenhall in the Urban Dictionary, well, if you want to use the words to describe it, I'll let you describe what Mendenhalling
David, we're on the same level. It seems like you're right here with me. The term Mendenhall, and to our Global Spiritual Revolution partners, I'm so excited to have back with us Mr. David Hawkins. I wish I had your mind and your gifting of retention. Go to urbandictionary.com, type in the word Mendenhall, which is capital Mendenhall. The term Mendenhall means to mount someone from behind while they are in the fetal position on the ground. After the deed is complete, you roll them over and see the humiliation in their eyes. This is best accomplished in front of a large audience. There's another term along with Mendenhall is the term rogered. Capital ROGERED, rogered, and I won't even say what that means because it's too graphic. But Mendenhall, which brings me to my next question. Why that word Mendenhall? Is it named after a person, place, or thing? And in history, reveal to us, David, the origins, the history, the historicity of this term Mendenhall, and is it still in practice today?
Well, that I don't know, other than the Urban Dictionary, but I started to Google to see if I could find the origins. There's a Mendenhall County where young black men hanged themselves in the jail, and apparently there was a 300-pound white sheriff there with a reputation for sodomizing the prisoners. Now, maybe you could check that. There's also in the United Kingdom a Royal Air Force base at Mildenhall. So there are no coincidences, but I haven't explored that in greater detail. What I'm interested in is, could those kind of oath rituals have been taking place at the pig farm? And my answer is, I think yes. I think a number of the people flown up in the Conair flights by Christine Marcy going to that pig farm were filmed participating in the torture killing of those women, and filmed.
Wow. And again,
and of course
go ahead, Dave. I didn't mean to cut you off. Go right ahead.
And that gives you, so when that kit, the servers, the files and everything else were taken from Starnet Communications, and I started on where a number of destinations I favor for hidden in plain view is one possible place. It was all taken to the war rooms of the Boeing company in Chicago that were just being commissioned, because that would give you access to all of the people who might potentially be blackmailed into silence or consent to the attack of 911. But there's another couple of targets that I thought would be interesting. One is building number 7 in New York, World Trade Center building number 7. And here's one that might amuse you, Bishop, is what about the Trump Tower?
Oh?
What about the Trump Tower?
Good point.
So let's say without the knowledge and consent of Donald Trump, the people who wanted to hide it in plain view took an office. And remember, the Trump Tower was developed by Donald Trump and AXA Equitable Life, right, was the co-developer of Trump Tower. AXA Equitable Life is a shareholder in Serco.
Wow.
That would have met on the 47th floor. So perhaps they knew or presented to Donald Trump on the morning of 9/11, well, Donald, what would you like? Would you like us to hit the North and South Tower and bring them down? Or would you like us to hit the Trump Tower and destroy your business and your family?
Uh-oh.
And if I was Donald Trump, not really understanding the capability of these people, I would perhaps say, well, you better take out the North and South Tower. Which would be consistent with the interview of Donald Trump immediately after 9/11, where he said there had to be explosives inside the building.
All right.
So he knows.
How would he have known that, too?
Well, but first of all, he knows from an engineering or an architectural point of view, you don't bring down 2 towers with 200,000 tons of structural steel in them,
right,
with a measly little plane that weighs 100 tons, that's predominantly aluminum, giving you the American pronunciation, plastic and bodies, with a couple of titanium engines. So going back to the patent office, what they built, I believe, was a very sophisticated incendiary device in the form of aluminum plates, the sandwiching rocket fuel, put it on the inside of the elevator shafts of the shafts that were actually upgraded and completed in March of 2001, with elevators that would go from the ground floor up to the top in one hit, instead of stopping in intermediate ways. Probably the most aggressive elevators ever built, and it was installed by a company called Ace Elevators of Palisades, New Jersey, which has no reputation for that kind of scope. So I think they were a front for the British intelligence or Ministry of Defense. And what I think they did is they installed incendiary devices inside the elevator shafts, which would be consistent with the 10-ton girders coming out of the top and landing, embedding themselves in buildings 100 meters away, right? And those incendiary devices were triggered, I believe, by sparking between the aluminum plates from the silicon-controlled rectifiers that were installed in the building as part of the elevator upgrade.
So do you think, David, not to be belaboring the point about 9/11, do you feel from your studies that this whole cabal, this global conspiracy concerning 9/11 was in preparations years in advance? This was in the planning stages. They probably just didn't wake up one morning, okay, you know what? Next month we're going to bring down the towers. I believe that this was years in advance. What say you?
Absolutely. So David Rockefeller, I like to quote him when people ask me what's the motive here.
Yes.
He said the world is ready to move to a supranational government of world bankers and an intellectual elite.
Wow.
Right? Now that preparation, he was a really old scumbag when he died. I think he had 102. He'd had about 7 heart replacements from peasants. You know, he had his own surgeon. I mean, really, the guy should have left us much earlier. And he's an evil scumbag. But that's
Yes.
you know, I don't want to be rude to evil scumbags.
No.
But anyway, so that takes decades of planning.
Yes.
Right? And you see, there's a concept of Fabianism. I don't know if you've heard of that
Yes.
in the United Kingdom, and the London School of Economics is basically derived from the Fabian ethic. So back in the 19th century, they sought centralized credit, government by an elite, and depopulation. Right? So there's a thread here that actually runs from a technical point of view through the patent office. Because back in the end of the 19th century, the British were patenting things that were absolutely key in any successful prosecution of war, including, for example, the Marconi wireless telegraph
Yes.
in, I think, 1901, which the Americans stole in the 1920s to form Radio Corporation of America.
You know, so
So,
interesting too, David. And I'm sorry for cutting you off, but I wish we can keep you here all day. This Piranha project, and you and I had talked about on the audio portion of the broadcast through iHeartRadio and iHeartMedia Group. In the capsule, what is this Piranha project? In conjunction with the University Battelle Institute in Tennessee, along with the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. What say you about that?
Okay, so there are two piranhas that I've sort of got my head around. One is I created an acronym piranha for the various patented devices to get involved in ethnic cleansing. So the P is polonium, I is for injex, R is for ricin, which is the protein that killed a guy a spy in the United Kingdom. Piranha. Then you have anthrax that was used after the attacks of 9/11. Novichok, which allegedly was used to take out the Skripals in Salisbury in England. And then A for ammunition. So incidentally, you've got 1.4 billion rounds of hollow point ammunition hidden in plain view in the United States today, where you need to find out where that's hidden. Have they been loaded up with biological device? The other piranha is the one that's at the University of Tennessee and Battelle Institute, and that has about 8 key patents associated with it, presumably taken out by UT Battelle. One of them is the use of a system to mine health records to identify abnormalities. Well, I don't know if you know what abnormalities. We all have abnormalities, right?
Right.
Now, depending on the perspective of the person who wants to purge the world of abnormalities, it might be that you've got black skin, or you're white skin, or you're heterosexual, or you don't believe in climate change, or whatever. But the worrying thing about that, it looks very much like the cleansing attempted by the Nazis in World War II.
Interesting. And you know, I found out, and when you come back, Mr. Hawkins, in a few weeks, I really want us to get deeper into this Piranha project. I found out yesterday that the director of the University of Tennessee at Battelle Institute, Dr. Thomas Zachariah, and to our Global Spiritual Revolution partners, please go to www.ut-battelle.org/leadership. Again, quickly, ut-battelle.org/leadership. This Thomas Zachariah, who is not only the director of the Battelle Institute, but he's also the director of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory, in conjunction with the Battelle Institute. Now, this Thomas Zachariah has close ties to Indian intelligence in India. I found this out last night through a colleague in the gospel, a bishop friend of mine from the city of New Delhi, and who also works for the government. I would not say his name, but he said that the director of the University of Battelle, Dr. Thomas Zachariah, has close ties to the intelligence community in India. especially when it comes to cryptology. What say you? This is interesting.
Well, this comes back to interesting. I predict that you will find the University of Tennessee is a major user of the services of Teachers Insurance Annuity Association, which is a shareholder in Circa.
Yeah.
So you will find within the University of Tennessee people who might be described as members of the intellectual elite.
Yes.
So back to Rockefeller. When I left Cambridge, I was given a choice. I could have had probably a reasonably successful career in academia. I decided I wanted to have more adventure in my life, and I left it. But many people in academia, they think of themselves as members of an intellectual elite, and they can be very casual in their reasoning and come to the conclusion that poor people on the downtown east side or whatever, who are on drugs or whatever, and members of a minority, maybe religion or whatever, should be eliminated or exterminated. And let me tell them, and the message I would like to send through your listeners is, well, they've now woken a sleeping giant. Now, what is a sleeping giant?
Yes.
Bishop, it's people like you and me and
Yes,
your
sir.
listeners, right? Because we aren't that evil, right? We do sympathize. There's many reasons why you should end up on the streets in downtown east side with a drug record and all the rest of it, and why you might die of fentanyl poisoning, right? However, the crime scene investigation has to start in the heart of the injured community. And I'm going to dedicate the rest of my life to triggering that kind of impetus in communities that have been injured and showing them, to the extent I can, how to look at a crime from the point of view of what's known technically as actus reus and not mens rea. The guilty mind comes later. Until you know what was done and how it was done at a crime scene, you can't possibly speculate. I mean, you can speculate, but you'll be wrong on who did it and why they did it.
Wow. This
So
is
that's the
interesting.
message.
I wish we can keep you here all day, David, but we know you got to go. Excuse me. And to our Global Spiritual Revolution partners, and I want to say this in my ending as we wrap up the this powerful conversation. To all of our listeners, if you get an opportunity, look up the history of the church in Scientology. L. Ron Hubbard, who also worked in conjunction with this Russian Jewish philosopher by the name of Ayn Rand, capital A-Y-N, Rand, and in creating the Church of Scientology, which I believe is the creation of the Central Intelligence Agency. Matter of fact, Ian, or Ian, capital A-Y-N, Rand, her real name is Alyssa Rosenbaum. That's another topic for another day. But David, I'm going to say this. There is an engineer in the UK by the name of Dr. Sergi Santos, who has created female robots for men to have sex with, male robots for women to have sex with, and also children robots for pedophiles or people in the pedophilia community to have sex with. And this Dr. Sergi Santos is connected to Circle in the UK. This is crazy. What say you?
Well, knowing what I know about software, I would hesitate before having sex with a robot, because software can fail, and
Yes.
that could have a highly explosive impact. So I think I would bypass the idea of sex with a robot.
Oh, this is sick. I'm telling you. But David, this was fun today. And we want to thank you for coming on the broadcast today. And anything, I should have asked you this at the beginning of the broadcast. In the last 10 years of working with Able Danger, have you ever talked with by phone or text, email, or fax? Have you ever talked with Christine Marcy? Because a lot of our listeners want to know. Have you ever met her or talked with her? I would say in the last 10 years.
No, but of course her brother, Field McConnell, has, and I've talked to Field McConnell on and off every day for 10 years.
Wow. Is she still alive?
Yes, she is. She's kicking. Now, she's retired, but you don't retire from evil like that. All of your connections are still in place.
Yeah.
If I'm right about her flying prisoners up to the pig farm to get the film, she would know where the films are. And you know what? There's two intellectual property lawyers that I think know where those movies are. One is Hillary Clinton. The other is Michelle Obama.
Ah, and we're going to get into that next time too when we stretch over into 2 hours. I read something yesterday, and again, this is secondhand, that when Christine Marcy, who would be around 70 years old, retired, she became a consultant with a company by the name of McConnell International. So if you get an
Correct.
opportunity, talk to your partner there. Has he heard of this company or corporation by the name of McConnell International? And to our Global Spiritual Revolution partners, you can find it on McConnellinternational.com, McConnellinternational.com. David, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be back with us here today on the TV portion here on Global Spiritual Revolution Radio.
Thank you very much, Bishop, and I look forward to our next session.
I'm excited, and I'm going to have to come to Vancouver. I'm going to surprise you one day. And
Right.
to all of our Global Spiritual Revolution partners, and David, we know you got to go, but to all of our Global Spiritual Revolution partners, we are selling Day 3 T-shirts and other materials here. So, so our producer, Bobby, will put the information up on the screen. Also, it just came to me concerning these T-shirts here. You can go on Facebook.com/Day3TV. Again, below Facebook.com/Day3TV and order your Day 3 T-shirt. I believe it is a 3X for me because I can barely see my shoes now when I stand. But David, thank you so much, and we look forward to part 6 of the greatest conspiracy ever told. And last but not least, to all of you listeners right now, please sow into Global Spiritual Revolution Radio. Our producer Bob is going to put up that PayPal link. Quickly, paypal.me/Global Spiritual Revolution Radio. PayPal.me/Global Spiritual Revolution Radio. There it is on the top of Global Spiritual Revolution Radio. PayPal.me/GSRR Media Group. PayPal.me/GSRR Media Group. And when you give unto the Lord, He will give you more to give. All right. God bless you, Mr. Hawkins. And to all of our listeners, we're going to have this great historian back, this global forensics scientist here in the next few weeks, where we can go deeper into the Piranha Project, into this Mendenhall conspiracy, and also getting into the history of the senior executive services there in Washington, D.C. Have a great day, and have a great day, David. You still look good. Every time I see you, you're looking younger. And
Okay,
I don't know
well,
what
thank you.
I don't know what your I don't know if you're eating right or whatnot, but you look great. You look great.
Crime scene investigation is very stimulating.
And to all of us as radio and television hosts, we're going to get together to create some type of a movie or something, and this crime scene investigation type of movie or documentary. We'll talk more about that. All right. Have a great day, everyone. This will be uploaded on YouTube today /Global Spiritual Revolution Radio, including Facebook.com/Global Spiritual Revolution Radio, and last but not least, Twitter.com/Bishop L. Gators. The greatest conspiracy ever told, here with Mr. David Hawkins. Have a great day, and we see you next time here and only here on Global Spiritual Revolution Radio.
Okay, bye, Bishop.